And we're live again for another Whale Club Hangout. This is Whale Club Hangout number 32 with Mike Belshe from BitGo. He's the co-founder and CEO. Good to have you on, Mike.
Thanks, Vix. Nice to meet you.
All right. You have quite a honorable background of being in Google and such. Can you give us just a little bit of that background and what got you to found the company of BitGo? And then let's get into your product offering for exchanges and the service you offer.
Sure. Well, thanks for the kind words. I've been a tech entrepreneur, startup guy mostly for my career, about 20 years now. Got my first startup taste at Netscape many years ago, I guess in the mid-90s, which was quite a lot of fun. Did a couple of other companies after that. Founded a company called Lookout that did email search and went to Microsoft after it was acquired. But yeah, then I went to Google, was one of the first guys on the Chrome team, one of the first 10, and created a little protocol called Speedy, which turned out to work okay and is now HTTP 2.0. So after I'd been at Google long enough, I started to get back into the startup space, and I found Bitcoin. And like so many, in the tech arena, it's just been fascinating. So I've been very interested in it in terms of the potential that it had, kind of for world economies and whatnot. Also, bewildered by the many aspects of it that had to come together in order to build something interesting. So I've been in Bitcoin for the last 3 years or so. I started, I bought some Bitcoin early on. I helped my friends buy some Bitcoin. Back then, before BitGo existed, I was storing Bitcoin on behalf of my friends who were too non-technical to store it themselves. And I had a little air-gapped MacBook that I had under my couch for a long period of time. And then as the price started to rise, I realized the amount of money that I had sitting under my couch was just ridiculous. And if I lost it, I'd feel really bad for my friends, especially, but also for myself. So I started looking for another way to do Bitcoin, and in particular from Chrome. Chrome paid a lot of attention to security, and we watched the stats from the crawler at Google, and we just knew that the prevalence of malware was just on the rise like crazy. And so one of my fears was that single machine that I had, when I did go to turn it on or when I went to transact, that I could get robbed. So I started looking around at Bitcoin and found there was already an angle for it called P2SH. It was barely in use at the time. Many sites didn't even recognize a P2SH address as a valid address. So I helped patch some of those. But I built the first version of BitGo back at that time. Just a very simple idea, which is like, let's have the signatures for transactions be spread across multiple machines to give it a little bit more safety. So Bitcoin was born from there.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Now take us through basically what you guys offer as a business to exchanges.
Right. So BitGo is a wallet and security software offering, and we build a set of tools and software which helps folks, manage wallets, large and small. We help with fee management, unspent management, whether you have lots of little transactions or just a few large transactions. We provide indexing of the entire blockchain, so we monitor the blockchain, and then we provide a security layer, which is around, it starts with the multi-sig that I just mentioned. So the initial multi-sig offering is about protection from a single machine point of failure. A single machine could die. Either it could be subject to malware, or you get a hard disk crash. If you had a single machine with all the keys on it, you could forget the password to that machine and lose those keys, whatnot. So over the last few years, we've continued to just try to build more features to reduce single points of failure. And so that quickly evolved from just a multi-signature wallet into like a multi-user wallet. And businesses in particular have a need for multi-user wallets because, as you can imagine, if you're running a 24/7 Bitcoin service of any type, you've got multiple people at your organization that have to have some sort of role with the wallet. So when users share a wallet, they don't just share it equally. Instead, there's different roles. Administrators can kind of set the policies and who's allowed to share the wallet and the configuration and whatnot. Spenders can initiate transactions, and then viewers can just have audit rights. A lot of businesses have need to hand their Bitcoin transactions over to the accountants so that they can add it to the books properly. So we added kind of this multi-user capability. Now we've always had with BitGo, users are required to authenticate in with username, password, two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication can be Google Authenticator, Authy, YubiKey. I feel like I'm leaving something off, but you get the idea. Some form of second factor, and then they can participate, with their role on the wallet. Now, once you have kind of multiple users and in place, you can now start to do the next layer of interesting work, which is what we do is an application level policy engine. So this is a rules engine where you can do simple things like set transaction limits, set either volume based limits or volume per time limits. You can have white lists, you can have black lists, etc. And it's a core feature for an overall security architecture for like an exchange or any other type of business. So finally, those other features that we add, one of the key ones in the case of a hot wallet for an exchange, which I know you guys are interested in. The difference between a hot wallet for an exchange and maybe a hot wallet for other businesses is that usually the hot wallet for an exchange is operated at least partially unattended. So you set up some sort of rules for how that wallet can operate kind of under normal circumstances, and then you deal with exceptions separately. So we do a lot of that. And when you use it in that case, you'll typically have a machine that's initiating transactions. So we lock that down to a particular IP address in all cases. And finally, we have what we call a webhook callback. So when the customer sends to us a transaction to be co-signed, obviously we have to run through a whole bunch of rules. We've got this rules engine that we run through, which is this set of rules set up by the administrators of the wallet. So we can check the transaction limits. We can check white lists, black lists. We check to see if it's a known bad address that we're sending to. We check to make sure the unspents all line up. There's not a double spend, a whole bunch of things. And if all that passes, then finally we can do a callback to the customer where the customer can have an isolated machine set up, and it can see, hey, this is the last call before BitGo co-signs this transaction on your behalf. They can then check and make sure in their database, oh yes, we have a pending withdrawal for 4,000 Bitcoins, and they can approve it and then send it back to BitGo, or they can reject it and freeze the wallet. So that's the basics of what we do, is that wallet management and kind of security infrastructure. Because what we do is a lot of hot wallet work, most of this is API based. So a lot of times customers will integrate this process into their existing applications, like their exchange software. They'll also have back office tools. Those back office tools will often be used to do things like approvals of out-of-band transactions. So maybe they have a spending limit that's set up and they're only going to spend, say, 1,000 Bitcoins per day. Then if somebody has a legitimate withdrawal for 5,000 Bitcoins, the rules engine is going to flag that. And so that's going to go into a pending approvals process. Whenever this happens, some number of administrators need to approve the transaction that's outside of the normal policy. So again, the customer has a setup configuration that they do, which was done when they provisioned the wallet, where they can say, hey, this is going to need 3 administrators to approve it, or 4 or 5. They can pick 15. We don't care, but kind of that's up to them. So sometimes they'll write their own software that's kind of a tool that they use for managing that process to make it easy for their own operations personnel.
Got it. Bell?
Hey, this is Bitcoin Error Log. My name is John. You answered a lot of the questions we had coming up, or at least partially, so I'm going to skip a little bit Can you tell us like what the difference is between what might be a standard implementation of the BitGo wallet for an exchange, as I think maybe like companies like Kraken and Bitstamp use, in comparison to Bitfinex's setup, and also comment on what degree of customizability variance there is between all of these customers?
Sure. So first off, and I don't want to disappoint you too much, but I can't really talk about any particular customer's configuration. It just, it doesn't make sense for past customers, for future customers. I just can't say what they're doing. That's kind of their business, and you can direct the questions to them. I'm not trying to be obstructionist. Actually, I want to be as open and as candid as possible here. So I hope that, like, coming out of this conversation, you guys all have a good understanding of what it is that BitGo does, and hopefully you even feel that that BitGo is a very safe and secure system. I've had to answer these questions, in the last couple of months with literally every single one of BitGo's customers. Obviously, in light of what's happened, it's a time for pause and reflection. People need to know, like, how am I safe with BitGo? I can say through that process, we haven't lost a single customer as of yet. We've actually signed up some new customers as well.
You haven't lost Bitfinex?
Okay. Sure.
I'm just making sure, because I don't know officially until you just said so.
I can answer that one because Bitfinex has answered it already publicly, but yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We're no longer working.
Can I ask you, I have your blog up right here that you've come out, and I understand the not going into specifics part, but you say that the Bitfinex configuration was unique and other BitGo customers do not need immediate changes. So what configuration there is allowing them to proceed safely that Bitfinex was different in that particular situation, like you're commenting on your blog?
Well, I guess your question presupposes that it's the configuration that was inherently the problem, which I'm not sure I agree with. But again, we all know, like, Bitfinex was using the segregated wallet model. There's nothing inherently wrong with the segregated wallet model, mind you, but that is relatively rare. So that's a different configuration. But I think it makes, it raises the bar for the folks operating the exchange in terms of what's required on their part in order to keep that safe and secure. Obviously, following the breach, we did look into literally all the customers' configurations, and we reached out to them, and we actually pointed out to several of them a few places where things can be improved. One of the things I want to point out here is that security is different than software features in that you don't put it on the roadmap, spend 3 weeks on it with a team of 4 people, and then you're done. It's this thing that you're constantly evolving. You're constantly raising the bar. Everything's changing in our industry pretty fast, and so security aspects of it does too. So I'm not sure how to answer the question without revealing specifics about Bitfinex. And again, I don't mean to be obstructionist that way, but I'm happy to talk about everything regarding what BitGo does. So if you have questions that way,
I think just to try one last attempt at getting that sort of answer, I'll be very specific and say, do you have any commentary or information about specifically what happened in the hack to allow these coins to be released? Whether you have details about how they were allowed to be signed away, or how something was bypassed, or just some explanation as to give us insight as to how it happened and how BitGo isn't necessarily responsible.
Well, how about if we keep talking about how BitGo works for a little bit, and then come back to that question at the end?
Sure.
All respect for Bitfinex, and I want them to succeed. I'm disappointed, by the way, in a whole bunch of things about them. Don't get me wrong, but
can we just say, though, that the Bitfinex integration was unique compared to your other customers?
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind actually asking a little bit about the segregated wallet. that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So, who invented this segregated wallet?
Oh gosh, I don't even really know. Do you want to have how about we have a little definition about what a segregated wallet is?
Okay.
All right. So there's basically two kind of high-level wallet structures. One is an omnibus wallet, which is where you take funds from, and by the way, I'm talking about the cases for exchanges here. An omnibus wallet where you take funds from multiple end users and you put them all into a big wallet of some sort. The second one is kind of segregated funds, where you might split them into maybe a wallet per user. Now, the former has the disadvantage that nobody can see kind of like, is there Bitcoin in that wallet or not? I mean, you don't know how much the exchange actually holds, and so how can you know if they've accounted for yours? The segregated wallets offer a level of transparency which you don't get with an omnibus wallet. At least in times where you've had your account settled, that is, you don't have active trades kind of inside the exchange at that moment, you can see on chain, hey, yep, there's my funds right there. Now, the security aspects of both models really comes down to almost other properties. And the security of this is there's a trade-off between security features, ease of use and user experience, and risk mitigation. Like, what is your appetite for risk in terms of how much you would have exposed in a more online wallet versus less online wallet? So in the case of an omnibus wallet, the common thing to do is to split it into at least a few partitions, right? So you have your hot wallet and you have your cold wallet, and your cold wallet may hold the majority of funds. The hot wallet holds a small amount of funds, and that's kind of limiting your exposure overall in the system. You can even split that cold wallet into multiple partitions. You can split it across different vendors. You can use hardware wallets, paper wallets, or any combination thereof. In the segregated model, all of this is true as well, although there's kind of even more options that become available. So the key question is, who does hold the keys, and how much does the end user participate in working with their segregated wallet? So those are kind of some of the differences that you get. As you can imagine, an exchange implementing segregated wallets is taking on a higher bar. I mean, you've got more on-chain transactions, which means more fees. That's complicated to manage right there. And then for active trades that are happening, you've got some sort of settlement period that has to happen. And so that's more complicated as well. So the two models are quite different, and they have a lot of different properties, especially around kind of transparency and then ease of use.
Yeah, I think, though, it's really conflating the matter of risk, because what you've not really covered is the issue of hot wallets and cold wallets. Now, I mean, you could have everyone segregated using cold wallets, and really what I'm driving at is that the setup that Bitfinex took with the segregated wallet, I don't even need to mention Bitfinex here, but I mean, they're the only people using it, so I might as well, is that their security model changed from some coins in a hot wallet, and the hot wallet, no matter what security policy you have, by the very nature of the keys being online on an online computer, then it doesn't matter what you do, those funds are always 100% at risk, because anything from hackers to inside jobs. And the whole purpose of cold wallet is to limit your exposure for online risk. So what Bitfinex did was, and what BitGo allowed, which I'm really driving at, is to transfer change the exposure from, say, I mean, Bitfinex was saying they had maybe a few thousand coins, like 3,000 or 4,000 coins maximum in hot wallets, and the rest, 100 odd, 200,000 coins in cold storage. And they changed their security model by putting those all into a hot wallet, because the segregated wallet that BitGo operates is effectively hot, because your signing machines are online with the keys online, and their signing machines are online with the keys online. So I don't really understand how the segregated wallet was lauded both by Bitfinex and by BitGo, especially BitGo because your expertise is security, and obviously Bitfinex is not their expertise. But how that could be lauded when you're actually breaking a pretty well-established and well-oiled and well-practiced practice of having the majority of your coins offline, how did this happen?
Well, a lot of what you said is spot on, and then you're actually leaving part of the problem unsaid as well, or some of the possibilities unsaid. For example, you could have segregated wallets where the end user has a key, and either the co-signing engine or Bitfinex has a key. But the point is that the keys are dispersed among the actual end users. An exchange could be built this way, and it could be made to work. The user experience of it would be very different. And the properties of how fast it would take to make trades happen and all this would also be very different. So it's not quite true that segregated by itself has all these properties. Really, I think what you're addressing is the key management part of, where are they and how does that interact with, how does that come into play? But I mean, at some level, what you speak of is got some truth to it.
Well, I mean, I don't really know what to say to that. I mean, yes, key management is the issue. Something you said earlier, one of the reasons, I think deterministic wallets solve the issue of having, having lots of keys. You were talking about having them, people losing their keys. Well, deterministic wallets obviously prevent that because you can just have a simple secret written down, offline. But the issue really is that fundamentally the segregated wallet part is a bit of a red herring because it can be achieved, the transparency of funds can be achieved through a number of avenues, but fundamentally the way that you implemented your segregated wallet, the way you implemented that Bitfinex accepted, you accepted and lauded on your website, as we're the first guys to do this and how wonderful it is. But the fundamental issue was that you changed the risk exposure from a few thousand coins ever, which is the risk exposure that most exchanges have, a few thousand coins in the hot wallet, or even less maybe, to everything. I mean, literally everything. So I don't understand how. I mean, it's very difficult, not to, it's very difficult to be nice about this, or to sort of polite. But I mean, I don't understand how a company which lauds itself as a security company would even allow their customer, even if the customer said this is what we want, how that you would allow them to do that, because you're putting yourself at risk. It just seems unthinkable. I'm speechless.
Well, look, BitGo is ultimately a set of software and configurations that are controlled by the customer, and they do have full say over how the operation of the wallet's going to happen. So we don't actually control that. And this was architected by me. So hey, this is what we should do. They thought this was a good part of the plan. Now, we can't really talk about the second part of the configuration for Bitfinex. I mean, there's more to the story of like why did they pick this and how did it happen, and there's not much point in talking about that because I can't.
Okay, we can move on from that part, and I want to focus more on.
Well, wait, I do have one more thing I want to say.
Go ahead.
But also, I want to make sure that you realize that like there's a lot more controls that go into play with any security system, right? Even those offline cold wallets, if they're operated on frequently, have exposure every time you touch them. So I'm not saying that you're wrong about hot wallets are more exposed than cold wallets. This is true. But there's a lot of controls that go into play with keeping things secure. Now, obviously, there's a big failure here, so it's hard for me to just completely defend it. Completely defend it. But it's not as simple as just.
Okay, so yeah, so then I'm actually confused now about something, because before this Hangout, if I were to Google BitGo and I was to sort of look into what your company was about, basically it says, the leader in blockchain security. So create the world's most secure Bitcoin wallet. That's what it says, on your site, if someone's searching for you and everything. And now from this Hangout, I've learned suddenly that you're just a wallet management software company. You're not actually a security company. You're not providing security advice to your customers. You're just providing a software platform to manage wallets however they want. You're not actually a blockchain security company, and you're not actually advising clients to secure their systems. Is that right?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, and you might be getting into semantics here. In terms of advising customers and taking on their risk, I mean, look, Bitcoin is a young industry, to say the least. Now, in mature markets where you have assets that you store in a bank, there's a set of controls and a set of audits and regulations and things that go into what it takes to become a bank. And a lot of us in the Bitcoin industry are not super satisfied with the way that industry works. But when it comes to protections and advice and how money is stored and who's responsible for securing it, there's some well-established and clear definitions. In the case of Bitcoin and multi-sig, I mean, keep in mind, BitGo never held two keys, right? Like, we could disappear off the face of the earth and the customer still has all their funds. So we're clearly not a depository or a custodian like the bank. And if we had all known that, one of BitGo's customers had left their two keys, somewhere, and both of those keys had been used, there certainly wouldn't be any debate here that BitGo was not at fault because those two keys had been used. So what I'm getting at is the security of the overall system is dependent upon the players that are holding keys. So Bitfinex is a huge part of it. Obviously, they have the two keys. They have a lot of operational security that had to be in place to keep those coins safe. So do we give advice? We could give advice at one point in time, but what happens if they change their policies internally? I mean, at the end, after a breach has occurred, it ends up being a he said, she said versus, well, when we audited you or when we gave you that advice, then things were different. So if you've ever done a security audit, you'll find there's a couple of different forms of audits that you can get. One is you bring in an auditor and you say, hey, we want you to look at our system, we want you to pen testing, we want you to look at the software, the source code, whatever. You pay them and they do that. At the end, you say, hey, can I use your name to say that you audited me? And they'll usually say, no, you can't do that because I don't want my brand associated with you in case you screw up with something else unrelated to what I looked at. Now, there's another type of audit you can get, which is, and these usually come when an industry has, more maturity, has some standards in place. You can do SOC 2 level 2. I know some people have their own opinions about that. You can do ISO types of standards. A company like Ernst & Young, Deloitte, these guys can come in. They can do a big audit. They can verify you do all these procedures and processes. And then, yes, they will sign off their name. And they are compensated very highly for doing that. No, BitGo does not do audits. We've never done audits. We've never claimed to do audits. Bitfinex did not think we had audited them, et cetera. So in terms of a security company, depending on how you want to define that, I mean, I know everybody wishes that like BitGo was a great auditor and was, able to take on that type of thing, but that's just not what we do.
So to what?
But hold on a second though, because you did hold one of the keys in Bitfinex's multi-sig, right?
Yes.
So you are a custodian.
No, we are not a custodian of the funds. We could literally disappear off the face of the earth. And
you have total control as to whether or not to approve a signature with your own key, do you not?
But that's not enough to affect a transaction, and it's not enough to block a transaction.
Yeah,
So
I would agree that only the person that has the ability to finalize, finalize the transaction themselves. So Bitfinex could use two keys and finalize the transaction themselves, unilaterally. So in this case, they are a signatory. So what Belshe is saying is correct there.
But
So
is
let's
he
say-
also saying that when these 120,000 coins were released, that he had no opportunity to,
Right.
call that a fraud and
So
stop it?
what I find troubling is that entirely right. That's exactly how auditing works in both levels. But first of all, I mean, just from if I was the owner of BitGo and I was trying to have this image of providing security and convenience to the exchanges, then I wouldn't want a customer through their own ignorance and stupidity to do something which would reflect badly on my name. And because of that, I wouldn't allow my customers, no matter how big they were, to do anything stupid. I'd be like, these are the parameters that you can configure your wallet in. There are stupid things you can do which we won't allow. And if the customer doesn't want that, then fine, see you later.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on this track.
But the second thing is that there's also kind of a moral duty. So one of the reasons why we do these Whale Club Hangouts, I got into Bitcoin, in 2013 as a trader in the beginning, and we kind of all of us together, we built the trading community up in the sense that we thought if lots of exchanges have good products, well functioning, then it'll be very good for price discovery, and good for everyone and good for us as traders. So, and we would give, lots of advice to, basically we've advised every exchange that there is. And that sort of altruism that helps, ultimately helps everyone, including ourselves. The same way, BitGo, if they want to improve the security, because the exchange is getting hacked is a big issue. One big exchange getting hacked ruins the market for months. It takes months to recover. I mean, the market's ruined at the moment after the Bitfinex hack.
Let's say
hold on, it'll take time to recover, and it's just a moral obligation, I would have thought, at least for myself, that you wouldn't allow an exchange to do something stupid.
Can I come in here for a minute?
Coins at risk. And my get back to the point, ultimately, the fundamental mistake here was allowing an exchange to change their risk exposure from a few coins in a hot wallet to everything in the hot wallet. And that's really my point.
Yeah, and I understand there's some kind of semantics going on here about what's a custodian, what's these kind of things, but ultimately you put your brand equity on the line, attaching it with Bitfinex, with using your software. So don't you have a lot of diligence to do to protect your brand and to protect your company overall by at least going out to prevent, just basically, I don't know if Giancarlo is incompetent or the people at the BFX staff, but you got to kind of make your product dummy proof, right? Because your brand ultimately is on the line if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, certainly our brand is and has been hit materially by this event. Look, I think that the best way to protect this here, and the only way to build a secure system that you actually can 100% know is safe, is to take on full responsibility yourself. That's what banks do. We don't have a banking system for Bitcoin today, and I think we're heading there. I think we will have it. I think there'll be some people that will be a little bit grumpy about it, but there'll be some benefits that come out of it as well. So.
Okay, so let's say that there was 1.2 million coins taken instead of 120,000. Would that have been gone through your system without any kind of checks?
Well, you're jumping through a whole bunch of things.
No, it's a direct question.
Ultimately, we're all just trying to get to the point where you give us some information about how this happens.
No. This is very specific. Okay, if the amount that was transferred was 1.2 million bitcoins, would that have gone through your system or not?
If you have a policy set up to send less than 1.2 million a day, it absolutely would not.
So is there not a 1 million coin hard limit on your system for segregated wallets? Yes or no?
There is no such limit on our system.
Okay, so then this segregated wallet system that you set up for people doesn't have any security layers, even though you're saying all over your website and all over your brand that you're a security company.
No. I didn't say that at all. You asked me if there was a 1 million hard limit. There's not.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that for that
where did your system fail in approving this transaction?
Let's go back to how the system works. Customers set up their wallets, they set up the users on the wallets, and they set the policies on that wallet. The policies are governed by the customer. The customer determines what's right. We have customers that are large exchanges. We have customers that are small exchanges. We have broker-dealers. We have asset managers. We have individuals. What's appropriate limits for one customer is not the same as what's appropriate for another, which is why they all set their own limits. Hot-cold setups do the same thing when they pick how much to put in the hot versus how much to put in the cold. It's the same type of thing with you know, what types of limits you want to put in. Now, I'm not sure where you're getting the 1 million number from. I think it's.
I'll tell you, Mr. Belshe. I'll tell you where I got it from. I got it from one of your biggest, former biggest customers. They are under the impression that there was 1 million. They are actually under the impression that you had an advanced algorithm, which you were very, very proud of advertising before, and that you really sold this particular unnamed customer on. This algorithm that's supposed to detect fraud and to determine whether or not some transactions are suspicious. And isn't it suspicious then for 120,000 BTC to be moved within 3 blocks on the Bitcoin network? Isn't that something that this algorithm, which you sold these customers on, would have picked up no matter what the setup, whether it's segregated wallet, whether it's whatever? Isn't this what your whole company was really about, what you go to these conferences and present yourself as, what you sold customers on? Isn't really this basic layer supposed to be there no matter what?
Well, let's back up a second. So you're predicating a whole bunch of things that we haven't even talked about yet. First off, this algorithm which Giancarlo referred to, he said he had a conversation with me and that I refused to discuss with him the proprietary nature of this so-called algorithm. There is no such algorithm. There never has been. I did not sell it to him. I did not meet with him. I did not claim that it was some proprietary technology. There is a blog post which, you know, has been presented in the Reddit thread and whatnot, and I was actually quite surprised to see it surface here. But it talks about this thing that we call the dynamic fraud filter. Now, as you know, there's a lot of different types of fraud, and if you read that article, which was published, you know, some time ago, before this hack for sure, it describes at the top of the article exactly what it's referring to. Now, you may think that dynamic fraud filter is an overly broad term, and certainly as we sit here, I tend to agree with that statement. But Giancarlo and his team, they always knew exactly what BitGo does. They implemented BitGo into their systems. They understand the rules. They were well educated. They had lots of documentation. They had lots of consulting time to ask us questions and whatnot. So in terms of like just a fraud filter that can figure out which transactions are legit and which aren't, that's not there. What is there is that algorithm which checks a set of known addresses that we've seen in malware, and this is what the blog post describes, that are known to be stealing money. Now, just to hit this a little harder, like, you know, Visa and MasterCard have been battling for the last couple of decades to detect fraud transactions, right? And they do that with some success and some failure. But it's certainly not 100%. So when we decided to try to figure out how to combat fraud a long time ago, you know, we found other controls, and we think we have some that actually work better. So instead of having to guess by looking at patterns or amounts or whatnot, we actually have this webhook mechanism where literally on every single transaction, we can call back to the customer site and we can say, hey, here's a transaction. Do you want us to co-sign this or not? Is this legitimate or not? And they can set up that webhook handler on independent hardware. They can check their database. They can check additional policies. So this is akin to, like, sometimes if you were to go do a wire transfer for $1 million, your bank will call you up and say, hey, did you mean to make this transaction? And you can say yes or no. So likewise, they could put two-factor auth on that. They could do a whole bunch of things. So anyway, I know you had a lot of things there that you heard from Giancarlo about some sort of fantastic algorithm, but that wasn't from me. So I don't know what else to say.
So could you actually comment? Could you comment on the circumstances under which the CEO before you left, which was actually coincidentally he left 1 month before Bitfinex actually signed the contract to work with you? So could you talk about the circumstances of how he left, and was there any kind of company policy changes when you became the CEO, and how did this affect the contract with Finex?
I mean, I guess I could. There's really not much to say there. My basic answer, and I know you're parroting a lot of the things that Giancarlo mentioned. I mean, you got to remember, and I do wish Bitfinex a lot of success, and I hope that they get their fundraise and all that. But he's raising money right now, and he's having to convince people that he's got a safe system, right? And instead of answering the direct questions about why he's got a safe system, he's instead deciding to say, well, what about that BitGo CEO 2 years ago? And I mean, just ask yourself, what is he really doing? So if you have a specific question about that transition, I'm happy to hear about it. But it was a long time ago, and honestly, it's not material to the breach.
Well, why would the CEO leave right in the middle of negotiations for big clients? And I mean, this seems really strange and inopportune for him to leave in such. I mean, what was the difference between his leadership as CEO and yours?
Well, I'm not even, to be honest, I just don't even know how to answer the question because it's so irrelevant. Companies have a lot of reasons to transition CEOs. It happens a lot. What was your reason? The fact that it happened at the time that this contract was being negotiated really is not material. So if you've got something that you want to really talk about that you think is material, let me know. If you want to know about the difference between me and Will, who was here before me, Will's got, he's an MBA. I'm more of a technical guy. There's a little bit of difference there, but there's just nothing related to the breach. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, no, let's move it back and focus basically on the features that you're offering, because eventually, some people know I'm not very sympathetic to Bitfinex, and you might be on this panel and you think that a lot of people believe what Giancarlo says, but I've stated for quite some time that I believe the leadership at Bitfinex is incompetent. But that aside, it's about what you offer as a company, and you're putting out, releases, saying things about security. You have this dynamic fraud filter, and such like that. So that's directly, stuff that you're offering as a business. And if your clients aren't able to use that appropriately, what benefit do they really have of going with your software?
Well, I think there's a lot of benefit, actually. I think that's attested to by the fact that, our other customers are staying with us, even in light of what's happened. But I do agree with you. Like, let's focus on what BitGo does offer. So look, I'd be interested in feedback from you guys about what's wrong with the model that I presented here. Basically, what happens with BitGo when you set up a wallet and you have multiple admins, you've got multiple administrators that are responsible for approving policy changes. You've got multiple administrators that are responsible for approving transactions. As I've stated before, and it's 100% true, BitGo's software operated actually the way the rules of the wallets in question were set up. And I know that's not the outcome that folks want to hear, and I'm not trying to be cold. I'm actually extremely sympathetic to the users. This is a terrible thing for the industry at large. But in terms of BitGo's security as a product, like you said, the model is set the rules, enforce the rules, and then when it's out of band, multiple administrators at the customer site are responsible for ensuring yes or no on change.
Okay, so I mean, I have some commentary there. You've also solicited feedback for what's wrong with the model. So an interesting data point with regard to the competency of.
By the way, Jack, I do want to also say, like, what I just outlined is a strategy for a single wallet. It can be applied to hot wallets. It can be applied to cold wallets.
Sure, I understand. Yeah, I understand. That's fine. An interesting data point, which you may or may not be aware of, but Bitfinex appeared not to understand that multi-sig is about policy, and they seem to confuse it with being a replacement for cold storage. So, I mean, that's something that I think is key, that customers really understand what multi-sig is, and that it isn't cold storage, that they actually solve two different issues. One is a key management issue, and the other is a policy issue. So, but in terms of what's wrong with the BitGo model, I mean, first of all, the fact that you're allowing customers to choose, to do anything they like at all, regardless of the sanity of it, I think is negligent. I mean, I have no other word for it than that, because, like, if an exchange, they were a customer of yours for a long time, and even just through analyzing their daily activity, few thousand coins withdrawal per day, suddenly 100. I mean, when you're up to 20 or 30,000 coins, by then alarm bells should have been ringing, so I think that just doesn't make sense. I think there has to be sort of an overriding. At least you shut the system down. Someone gets on the phone to to Bitfinex and say, "What the hell is going on here?" Like, you halt it. Like, you have to have some kind of oversight and some kind of overruling.
Right, because otherwise you're not a leader in blockchain security like it has all over your website. You're really just a software company providing wallet management solutions, which is two completely different things.
And that's what I wanted to ask too. Like, do you just provide software, or are you a software and hardware provider via partner channelships, whatever? And specifically, key management and HSMs, like dedicated hardware devices. So do you include that within some of your customer implementations? Yes or no?
No, the key storage on the customer side is up to them to do. It's actually not part of what we store.
Okay, so that's out of your band at that point. So any exchange, that would be their responsibility for key management and.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the next thing that's wrong with, not wrong, but a problem, is problematic. I mean, and it's not unique to just to BitGo. I mean, API services are very convenient, but they do undermine the security model of Bitcoin.
Well, let's talk about that before you say. I know where you're going. Actually, are you familiar with BitGo?
Pardon?
Are you familiar with BitGo?
BitGo, no.
Okay, so I get this complaint a lot, and actually it's somewhat rooted in history. But let me tell you what happens with BitGo. So BitGo is a piece of software that we ship, and it's got this thing called verification mode. And what it is, you set it up side by side with an instance of Bitcoin D. And so BitGo receives all of its data about transactions and notifications and whatnot straight from BitGo. Now, the common complaint, which you've just surfaced, is that, well, wait, what happens if BitGo's hacked? A service, they might be corrupted. That's true. And so we've already considered that. And what happens is, on the client premise, BitGo will go and check everything that it receives from BitGo's API against what it sees in its own local instance of Bitcoin D, which is attached to the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network. And the reason for doing this is to make sure that it's exactly not undermining the Bitcoin network. So anyway, this is a common complaint that we get. I think there's been a lot of API providers that have not gone through the due diligence of actually making their software work this way. But we have considered it, and it's absolutely there.
Okay, fair enough. So the other, so I mean, I think the issue of multi-sig is something I understand. My complaint about the API thing is pretty much, it's just the idea that one hands over wallet. I mean, if I want to run an exchange, I can just run the exchange, and I can hand over the wallets to handling to another company. I can hand over even my bank, wires in and out can be outsourced. So all this outsourcing is quite a problem. But specifically the policy of multi-sig, really, it's like signing a check. I mean, in your company, if someone signs a check, like maybe it comes to your desk, and you'll look at the purchase order, you'll look at the invoice, you'll see, has the person who ordered the thing received it and signed the invoice. There'll be a kind of due diligence checks, and then it will go to the second signatory who will perform those checks as well. And I really don't see how that can be done in a sort of a third-party provider, because you don't have access to all their back-end systems, to look at customer data and customer patterns and all the stuff, the heuristics you would run to determine if the transaction.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. I mean, first off, a couple things. With the exchange's fiat currency, they don't hold that on premise. Instead, they put that in a bank. They outsource it to a third party that's a known, trusted party that, if that bank is robbed or if that bank goes under, they're going to lose all that money. Second, Bitfinex, they were been hacked before. I'm not trying to be too critical. The industry learns over time. They were hacked, before they had BitGo. At the end of the day, they're an exchange and they like to trade, and they want to trade stuff, and they're continuing to focus, like all the exchanges, on that business, and they would prefer to focus on that business because that's what they're good at, right? I think they ultimately want to be able to outsource things like their wallet handling to somebody else. Now, obviously, this one, it didn't work out so well for a number of reasons, and that is what it is. But we are absolutely, as an industry, heading in this direction. Professional custodians of Bitcoin is just as much a destiny as professional custodians of fiat.
But you just said before that BitGo is not a custodian. Are you not a custodian, or are you a custodian then?
Well, we're not. I mean,
so if the industry is moving in this direction, then BitGo is not benefiting from it because you're not a custodian, right?
Well, wait. Let's get into. Okay, look, money is different than other types of software, right? So in order to be a custodian, there's a legal definition of a custodian, right? And if I were to take custody of someone else's funds, that puts me into a very different position than as a software company where I'm assisting someone else with that. Also, a depository, like a bank, is different from a custodian. So these have legal definitions. They're regulated industries. BitGo doesn't have those. We've never claimed to have those. When I said where we're going as an industry, that is where I think we're going as an industry. In terms of what Bitfinex and others have done right now by choosing BitGo, is they're saying, hey, look, we can get a company that focuses on wallets, whether it be fees or scalability or HD or privacy or these security properties. Those guys do it better. We'd like to use them. There's a material benefit of towards one of the most common types of theft, which is insider jobs, by having two companies participating, and there you go. So anyway, I hear the concern about this is a core function of the exchange today, and then maybe they should just hold it all themselves. But actually, I think where we're going as an industry is that no, they're not ultimately going to be the best maker of safes for Bitcoin. That will be an outsourced function.
No, I don't think you're right about that. I think, especially in light of everything, it's I mean, code, as Drake had mentioned before, the key is that all, if not like 95%, 99% of customer funds needs to be held in a cold wallet. Okay, you should not be managing any of it at BitGo, obviously. Like if I,
by somebody else, and I'm quite certain that Xapo and others that do cold storage could take custody in a cold storage capacity much more effectively than somebody that's an exchange-focused corporation.
Right, but listen, the issue with, the issue of Bitfinex, the reason, I'm of the opinion that any hot wallet, no matter what you do, even if it's in an HSM device, you know, in a data center, you know, which is a pretty secure setup, it doesn't matter what you do, that money is 100% at risk. You know, you can make it much, much more difficult, you know, to be at risk and whatnot, but it's always going to be at risk.
Well,
And
even
the
at cold storage, that's 100% at risk too. I mean, at some point, risk is just a scale.
Okay,
Look,
fair enough. But fair enough. But
let's go back to the topic you're asking about. You were asking about.
But listen, hold on, come on. There's a completely different bar. I refute categorically that cold storage is anywhere in the same league as the risks of hot storage. If
I agree.
The problem here was that, you know, two companies agreed to let this happen, that, you know, all of Bitfinex's wealth would be transferred into hot storage in exchange for this segregated wallet business, you know, for the transparency.
Yeah, let's put it this way. Okay, let's say that I'm a top exchange coming to you now, and I say, okay, I'm considering a BitGo solution. Okay, right now I'm storing 99% of my customers' coins in cold wallet, which is a nice tried and tested system. And I come to you and I say, listen, I'm considering turning over all of my customer funds into a BitGo segregated system away from my cold wallet solution. What would you say in response to this kind of idea?
I would say, where are the keys going to be?
You would, well, would you? But if you are not able to provide it in a cold, in a specifically cold wallet manner, then and then how could you argue that your solution would be better regardless of how the keys are being managed?
That's why I asked about the HSM as well earlier.
Well, the reason I'd ask about where the keys are is because if the keys are offline, that is cold storage.
Yes, and?
Yeah, but the question is, though, about adopting a system that you are offering as a product, as an alternative to a in-house managed cold wallet storage.
I guess maybe you're missing one part of the BitGo functionality. So BitGo's system works both hot and cold. So you asked me what would I do if an exchange came to me and they said they wanted to use segregated wallets? The first question I'd have is, okay, well, where do you want to put the keys? If they want to put both keys cold, 2 keys cold, and then one at BitGo, that's a perfectly safe system. Now, then the next question becomes, you know, how do they interact with the user accounts, and, you know, how do they manage it? And what are the policies around it? So you know, there's more to be dug into this. That was my answer.
Okay, so how many clients do you have now where you are implemented a cold wallet system?
Lots.
I'm just wondering if we've reached the point where you've explained how BitGo works enough to get down to the detail of how you think the hack happened and where BitGo failed.
I don't think he's going to answer that question.
Yeah,
but
well, it sounded like he wanted to do some prep to
listen,
make
guys,
an attempt to answer.
I think it's pretty clear that all the other exchanges are storing most of their coins in a cold setup, and they're using BitGo to manage their hot wallet. And I mean, in a sense, there's no, you know, that's not a big change from their previous security model. You know, it could be a little bit better in terms of managing the hot wallet, but the risk is always there for the hot wallet. You know, you're always at risk of getting hacked. You know, if something is online.
But they're only.
I mean, in the end, BitGo is always
exposing
providing some level of automation. Like,
Yeah,
there's always some kind of extra layer they're adding on that is an attack surface.
But they're only, you know, the other exchanges, I've talked to Nate and Jesse over at Kraken, and, you know, they're using it for their hot wallet. So that's all the exposure they're getting versus what Bitfinex implemented. But I wanted to come back specifically to BitGo's business model. And I'm kind of feeling now that it's almost like, you know, like you don't want to be a custodian and you can, you know, then you're a software service and stuff like that. But then it starts to come into this element where, you know, you're saying that the, you know, Bitcoin is trending towards being, you know, specific custodians for Bitcoin, and that's their only business. But like, what skin are you putting in the game as a company then for people to use you? It seems like, now it becomes, they didn't use the software appropriately or didn't do the, the parameters and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the money is completely under the control of the exchange. It's a 2 or 3 key system. Like I said, BitGo can disappear. So in terms of skin in the game, I mean, it's not our money, and it's not our decision on how to store those keys or whatnot. I think there's some types of failures that the exchange could have where you just clearly say, oh, well, that wasn't BitGo's fault. There's other types like this where you don't know all the details, but you can probably imagine cases where the exchange didn't necessarily do their part of the job. I think the questions you had earlier about the brand risk to BitGo, it's large, and I think the early stages of the industry bring us to where we're at. There are no custodians for Bitcoin today. The reason BitGo is not a custodian is largely due to regulatory and legal. We actually can't be right now. I'm not saying it's always going to be that way. And I think once it does change, then the skin in the game that a BitGo can have can be real. For now, it doesn't work that way. Right now, it's the exchange money.
Do you think hold on, Track? Do you think you as a startup could survive long enough with that business model to get to a custodianship role? Because, I'm kind of with Giancarlo from this standpoint of, bringing in a third party to do what I consider core functions of an exchange, and one of them is, the storage of coin actually is a core competency of it, as well as the matching engine. Both things that Bitfinex of all exchanges decided to try and outsource their matching engine and then did outsource the storage of their coins. So, isn't your business model and, your startup contingent upon reaching that point?
Well, I think our business model is going to work great, actually. So, and I don't really want to go into it in too much depth here. But I think
in the end, you do need to be leaning on your reputation. That the brand damage that you took from this, is something you have to take control of and heal. And that we're trying to get you to explain how BitGo was not at all responsible for this, or what maybe they did do wrong. And we're not really getting anything more than, well, we don't manage our software, the customer does.
And I think that's what people are like. The panel here is objecting to. You say you're not a custodian, but it's kind of irrelevant. You're able to assist a hacker in emptying, $70 million worth of coin. Like, it doesn't really matter whether you're a custodian or not. Like, BitGo's system participated by hook or crook in the emptying of funds, and that hasn't helped the customers. It hasn't helped the industry. This is a big deal now, and it's unfortunate.
Well, Bitfinex, I guess I don't want to get into the configuration there. Sorry, I almost got led into discussing them. Look, all of our exchanges set up the security of their own wallets the way that they see is fit. We do offer all of the hooks to make it so that you have to have 3, 4, 5, 10 administrators each independently approve, and those mechanisms have not been breached and did not fail. So I think.
So is the simplest thing to say that Bitfinex used your software incorrectly?
Again, I don't want to comment about Bitfinex. The thing is like, is that model, whether it is internally deployed or externally deployed? A lot of what you've asked about was third-party, stuff. Imagine they had it all internally, hosted by themselves. Is that a good model? What caused it to fail?
Another way
is that you're looking for some way that BitGo could have audited all of Bitfinex. And
well, you could have, because
no,
basically
what we're looking for is a way to say that BitGo actually added a layer of security and not a layer of insecurity.
Okay, well, we did. We enforced the policies that were set by the client.
Right, but when you're a security company that doesn't actually provide security, you just provide wallet solutions. And this is basically the issue is that people, any exchanges that are using BitGo services, BitGo doesn't have your back. BitGo is just a software company. So BitGo isn't actually going to help you set up your security properly. All it takes is setting a simple little parameter and your whole fucking cold wallets or whatever coins could be wrecked, basically, because BitGo isn't helping you with your security, right?
We are not an auditor. That's absolutely right. You know, if you wanted to go pay E&Y and to do an audit of your exchange, and I think all exchanges should be doing this thing. They should be doing operational security. They should be doing audits. I think actually the real question is, you know, do exchanges, whether it's third party or not, employ that today? And you know, Bitcoin as a young industry, you're going to find a lot of players are not participating in the way that, you know, traditional finance does, and that's going to change over time as things get bigger. But at least for today, if your expectation is, you know, that you get in the Bitcoin world what you get in traditional finance, it's not there.
No, I think it's a totally reasonable expectation for BitGo customers who are, you know, sold on the idea of you being a security company and providing security solutions. It's totally reasonable for them to assume that you would at least provide some kind of guidance, not necessarily a full audit and all this stuff, but at least some basic layer of security. That's a totally reasonable expectation. Otherwise, you need to do a total, you know, replacement of the word security on your webpage to something like wallet solutions, because that's the reality of it. And you're misleading your customers by making them think that you're providing security when really it's just a software that.
I agree. I feel like it's misleading to say that, you know, your software behaved correctly when you were doing the checks with your own key. You know, the money got out, you know, so like it's almost like a delusion for your customer to think, oh, well, you know, this transaction is going to go through the BitGo checking process and we'll have that as one security stop point. But if the customer can easily bypass that by having a bad configuration or getting, you know, hacked by somewhere in the middle, then what the hell's the point?
Well, you know, I guess we're going to have to disagree here a little bit. If Armory or some desktop software, which claims to be security software for Bitcoin, sells into an institution, and then the institution doesn't protect the keys, you know, I don't think we would be having this debate. I think the reason we're having this debate has more to do with the fact that BitGo's a service company in addition to a software company. But you know, we all know that.
Well, I think it's because you did have a role in signing the transaction. You were part of the checkpoint process.
We again, you know, we did exactly what the wallet was configured to do.
All right.
Can I jump in for a second? Or just
go ahead, Widespread. I just actually before you go, I just want to say that you know, I thank Mike for coming on, and I'd like to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so. I got a couple more things to go over, but I'll let you go first, Widespread.
Yeah, I just, you know, I want to reiterate maybe more calmly what Swap was saying about, I don't think anybody would expect you to audit, you know, audit an exchange's security. But I think for maybe a value add that people perceived, whether it was real or not, for your product was that, you know, there would be an extra layer of security, but at the same time that maybe that they had an expectation that the product that you offer, that, you know, that if there were a configuration that put them at a huge risk, that there would be some kind of positive feedback. And maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe that wasn't required. You know, I'd be interested, without really trying to sit here and go over the past and try to, you know, nail you on any little detail, to ask you what policy changes are you looking at moving forward to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again? You know, and without really getting specific into what, you know, Bitfinex, whatever. But I'll leave it at that, and I'll let Vix take it out from there.
Can we also get into, it's up on my screen right now. I know this came out after the hack. You know, you said your software was operating correctly, and you've now included these other policies in there, or maybe they're just a reiteration of what was already there. But, you know, there's one key line in here where it says changes to the policy cannot be made via API and may only be unlocked via BitGo operations personnel after manual out-of-band identification and authentication process. So I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like, that's something that wasn't in place prior to the BFX hack that is now there. So I guess this is some of your solutions going forward, correct?
Yeah, so it's my opinion that multiple human authorizations from the customer, webhooks, and the features that are provided in the BitGo platform today should suffice to have prevented everything that happened here. So we believe that the system actually is secure. In order to do an extra measure, we're realizing that, it's easy for customers to make mistakes in some ways. And so we've made immutable policies. This has caused some hindrance to a number of customers with false positives. But that's a change that we made to help make sure that if there is poor configuration, that it's less likely that something disastrous will happen.
I think false positive is expected in a fraud prevention system.
All right.
Can you comment and say and confirm that there are actually, authorities that are investigating this hack, that maybe that you've cooperated with?
Yeah, we've cooperated, yes.
Okay. And can you say which authorities?
I don't think they care. FBI.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think anybody's mentioned that yet, unless I missed it.
No, that's good. And this kind of comes back a little bit, and we'll kind of wrap it up after this. And I really thank you, Mike, for coming on. I know it's kind of a hot seat to be in, but I have to say, this has been a great experience, hearing everything that you had to say. But basically, there was a time, and maybe you can clarify, I'm not quite clear about this, that you offered some kind of insurance. Supposedly this insurance was taken off the website right after the hack, then put back on saying it had been discontinued back in January, and those parties or clients were notified. What entailed that insurance part? And to me, this starts to sound like custodianship. I know you've spent this whole time defending that you aren't a custodian, but now we start to bring in insurance of funds, and now I'm starting to feel this custodian-like vibe again.
Okay. Yeah, the insurance policy that we had, remember there's a lot of different types of insurance policy. We had a cyber protection in case, some failure at BitGo. So if we had some sort of cyber theft that happened here, that was the policy we got. We got it early on. We were able to get that actually because of the multi-sig model. It was quite expensive, and we carried it for a year. It had an annual premium. And after, I think this was, it's February, March 2014 to, 2015 to February, March of 2016 this year. So at the end of last year, December last year in January, as we started to approach the renewal, by the way, the insurer was willing to give us a reduced rate, which is pretty common. If you have no claims and no issues, they'll often give you a reduced rate. But it was still ungodly expensive. So I reached out to all our customers. I said, hey, are you interested in us carrying this? We're gonna have to pass through costs. And everybody said no. I had a specific conversation with Phil Potter over at Bitfinex, and he's like, no, we wouldn't do that either. So the fact of the matter is the insurance policy that we had wouldn't have covered this case anyway because BitGo wasn't breached. So it actually had no meaning there. Secondarily, nobody was willing to pay for it, including Bitfinex. And then third, so we did notify everybody. And then lastly, and the unfortunate part about it is that, yeah, as soon as this breach happened, people start looking at everything. And there's old blog posts about the insurance, and we needed to make sure we got it updated. So we got it updated, and kind of went down and up, and it was updated, and that's it. We weren't trying to hide anything, certainly, but we didn't want people to think that there was some sort of insurance there either, because that definitely wasn't true. Our customers have always been, it gets a little bit muddled in the Bitcoin world sometimes, but our customers are the exchanges, right? Our customers aren't the exchanges customers. It's just the exchanges are our customers. So suddenly there was a scrutiny from a new group of people, and we were trying to get that corrected. That's it.
So how long are these contracts that you have signed with like Bitstamp and Kraken? Like how, what's the typical length of the agreement with BitGo?
You know, we don't really talk about that. If you want to sign up and be a customer, we could.
No, okay, just I mean in general. That's, I don't mean to be specific. Just in general, what kind of?
I think the relevance is that like it feels like there were definitely Bitfinex customers that were under a certain impression of what the product was that BitGo was providing through Bitfinex to them, and I think that, you know, when you have the policy or the blog about the insurance policy get edited after the hack, and you have various other clarifications come about how Bitfinex was a custom setup, how is any given customer for any of your clients supposed to know where they stand terms-wise and protection-wise with you, especially if there are contracts that end and that kind of thing?
Yeah, man, I'd love to be a customer, but I'm scared I'll make the settings wrong and get all my coins stolen.
Oh, that's really kind of you. So to answer the actual question that was put forth there, look, I mean, we don't even know who Bitfinex's customers are, right? They're not registered with BitGo. We don't know them. We don't have a relationship with them. We haven't had a chance to enter into an agreement. As you know, pretty much every website that you go to, you know, there's some terms of agreement, and these are important. We tend to gloss over them, but they have meaning, and it's simply not possible to have an arrangement with BitGo unless you actually had signed up as a BitGo customer. So if folks have a impression that by working with Bitfinex that they are suddenly a customer of everyone that Bitfinex is a customer of, I mean, that's just mistaken. I'm not sure how to correct it.
But you don't discriminate between a Bitfinex customer and a non-Bitfinex. I mean, a BitGo a registered customer and a non-registered customer in process, do you?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, I know the exchanges that I work with. I don't know the users of the exchanges that I work with. How can I?
No, but I mean, like within the exchange, yeah, you don't know the difference between a customer that is registered as a BitGo user. In other words, like in Bitfinex, there were two different types of users but they were all in the BitGo wallet. There were users that were registered and identifiable with BitGo, verified, I guess, with Bitfinex, and then there was the, you know, pseudonymous ones, but everybody was in the BitGo wallet, right?
Okay, well, yeah, let's clarify that. All right, you're right. So I think starting in March, no, it was May of this year, Bitfinex entered into an arrangement with BitGo where there was a slightly different mechanism for some US customers. It's a very small number of customers. And when those customers did go through a particular opt-in process, yeah, they became both BitGo and Bitfinex customers. But this is an extremely small subset, actually. And it's also as of May this year, which was, you know, 4 months after the insurance had been removed from the BitGo website and all that kind of stuff. So if there was any confusion about, you know, insurance there, I don't believe that to be true.
Okay, Mike. You know, I want to say thank you for being such a good sport during this whole thing. I know after you might, you know, take your G930 headset and throw it on the ground and smash it into a million pieces, but why don't you tell us what the vision for BitGo is in, you know, the next 2 and 5 years? Like, you know, what do you see your company becoming?
So actually, no. I mean, I don't feel bad about this conversation at all. You know, we have to have the hard conversations as an industry, and we have to bring this stuff forward, right? So, you know, what's happened has happened, and there's no way to undo that. I think there's a lot of basic questions that you've asked me that you could also ask some of the other participants that they haven't actually answered. But you know, it'll come out, and I think as people understand what's really happened here, when it does come out, it'll make a lot more sense. So in terms of where we're going for the future, all of us here at BitGo are huge fans of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies in general. You know, we've got a Bitcoin product, we've got an Ethereum product. We are working hard to continually move that stuff up. We still have a lot of customers that are dependent upon us, and we're trying to continue to raise the bar in security. So we will learn from this just like everybody else does, and just be good. I think in terms of how BitGo envisions us helping, it's about bringing traditional finance into Bitcoin. The reason we're excited about that is because we think there's just a large audience out there that simply can't reach Bitcoin today. Yeah, it's too complicated, it's too hard, it's too wild, wild west. But I do think we have the opportunity to help mainstream finance offer Bitcoin-related products to the world. And I think that's going to be coming sooner than you might think.
I did have one little question that I didn't want to miss. Do you think that as BitGo grows, and it's a centralized provider, so the more customers and more of a large entity you will be representing some aspect of the security of that pool of clients. Last year there was an incident where, I don't know what happened, the ape down, or there's some kind of issue, and it led to several of your clients not being able to process withdrawals, maybe deposits, I don't know, for their customers' for a short time. Do you think that's for BitGo could represent for Bitcoin?
I don't think that's a real problem. We have had this repeatedly in our industry. I mean, when Google goes down, that impacts a lot of people. Maybe a similar analogy would be what happens when VeriSign goes down and nobody can connect to any of their banks. Yeah, I mean, as things get bigger, bigger responsibility. But I don't see that as a problem. That's not centralization. Customers always have choice about how they use their wallets on the Bitcoin network. It may be a reliable.
Well, it's their practice that matters, not whether or not they do the right practice. It's what they actually end up choosing to do, And if they end up choosing to rely on, say, your API for a convenience, API is somehow gamed or disrupted for some other,
Well, that was
purpose.
my point about centralization. That API services are very convenient, but they, it creates centralization risk, not just in funds lost, but APIs down and that sort of thing. So
and with that, I mean, comes the decision of enforcing policies, like making a baseline for 100% of the customers if everything is centralized, right? Otherwise, it's just wild, wild west and do what you want, right?
Well, I don't think of these as problems we don't see everywhere, and I don't see them as impacting the Bitcoin network negatively. Yeah, if the New York Stock Exchange is down, nobody can trade on the New York Stock Exchange. Is it a big stock exchange? Yeah. Is it of strategic importance? Yeah. This is the world we live in. This isn't really a unique issue here.
All right, guys. I just want to take another moment to thank CEO of BitGo, Mike Belshe, for coming on today, and for the panel, BTC Drac, Bitcoin Airlog, Crypto Keeper, Swapman, and Widespread. This is BTC Vix, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.